Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. Today with me, I have an amazing guest. You will love him. And I'm sure that we will learn a lot from him, and his story will surely inspire us. His name is Scott Wilhite. He is a filmmaker, a social entrepreneur, and the author of the 7 Core Skills for Everyday Happiness, scientifically proven skills for a happier and more meaningful life. He also said something really interesting in our um, email exchange before actually putting this together. He said that gratitude is the single greatest skill anyone can have to transform their life. I think this is amazing. And without further ado, Scott, welcome to the Gratitude Podcast.
Hey, Benta, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you invited me on, and I'm excited to share some of the things that I've learned, and hopefully that will help your audience. I do want to start out, and I know this is probably an odd way to start out, but I had a super sad weekend. I have a family member who is going through some super hard times, and it has broken my heart. And it has been kind of a difficult challenge to go through. And I was thinking about our podcast recording this morning, and I was thinking about a comment that I hear from so many people that, when they hear what I do and what I've learned, and they kind of look at me as kind of a happiness guru, a lot of times they ask this funny question. They say, "You don't have to be happy all the time, do you?" And I've often thought about that. I thought, what, probably a lot of that is their perception that it's so much work to be happy, because, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background, my story. But a lot of times they look at it as work, that, you have to put on the happy face, you have to pretend and all that stuff. And boy, that's got to be exhausting to do that all the time. And that really isn't the case with happiness. And once you understand, gratitude and how you could use that as a skill, it really does transform your life. But, just kind of to explain a little bit about this last weekend with this family member, and the way that it's broken my heart. And, I see the pain that they're going through. And it's kind of one of those things where you wish you could go through the pain instead of them. Where you want to take that away, you want to help them out, but it's their it's their challenge, it's their road, it's their path. But I was thinking about the deep sadness that I had and that I was experiencing, and also realizing that I don't think happiness is the opposite of sadness. I think hopelessness is the opposite of discouragement, or of that you can't be, you can't, I'm kind of fumbling with my words here, but anyway, with happiness, I don't think it's the opposite of sadness. I think you can actually experience both at the same time. And with the sadness I was feeling, there was a lot of actual joy, because I'm feeling empathy. I'm connecting with another human, and it's like experiencing a broader spectrum of emotions. And so when people ask, do you have to be happy all the time? Absolutely not. Especially if you understand gratitude as a skill, it opens you up to this new world where you can experience just this whole range of emotions and the fullness of life. So anyway, I'd love to share my story and how I learned about this. I'm kind of a newbie to gratitude. And anyway, do you mind if I share that, Benta?
Yeah, so I wanted to add something that I believe that would be really interesting. I've also had on the podcast one of the leading experts in emotional intelligence, and he also said that it's very important for us to leave the emotions, to not to inhibit them or to suppress them or to do things like these, because when we leave the emotion of sadness or any kinds of other emotions that are perceived as negative, that permits us to live positive emotions as well, and to have a wider range of emotions. And I think that it's important that you mentioned this, and I wanted to add this little thing.
Oh, I appreciate you sharing that, Benta. Yeah, I find it interesting that the more I've learned, I'm still very new to all of this, but the more that I've learned, the more that we can enjoy just all of the emotions, boy, that just kind of gives us a zest for life. We're no longer flat, we're no longer a shadow of who we could be, but we're living as our full selves. And this journey's just been amazing for me, and so happy to share what I found with others.
That's awesome. Firstly, what I wanted to ask you is, what does gratitude mean for you personally?
Okay, I love this question. Gratitude, I used to think was the same as thankfulness, and it really isn't. What gratitude is it's recognizing that you are the recipient of deliberate kindness. And so that opens it up, because all of a sudden there's a connection between you and someone else. It could be a connection with you and a friend, a connection with you and a stranger. It can be a connection with you and God. But it means that you are the recipient of deliberate kindness. So somebody has done something kind for you, and there's that connection. And once I understood that meaning of gratitude, that's when my life really started to change.
That's awesome. I love it, and I think that I also like to mention this. I tend to be independent, but it's so beautiful when you get to in situations when you're interdependent, when others can do something for you, and you can feel the gratitude, the fact that you're not able to do everything in this world, and that you have other people that one way or another help you. With things that you knew that you needed help with, and even with things that you didn't even know that they could help you, and that could make your life even more beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful, I think, is the perfect word for it. When we have that connection with others, we feel like our lives matter, that we're part of something greater than ourselves. So yeah, just so important to establish those connections with people.
Definitely, definitely. And I know that you're a quote guy, and we talked a little bit about this before we got started. And I'm really curious if you have a favorite quote on gratitude, and if you want to share why you chose that particular quote.
Yeah, so I have a quote from Oprah Winfrey, and she said, "Be thankful for what you have, and you'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never, ever have enough." And the reason that quote means so much to me is because the way that my life was going was just so frustrating. I was living the dream. I was checking all the boxes that I was told would make me happy and make me successful. And I felt totally unfulfilled. By trade, I'm a commercial filmmaker. And I was traveling the world, doing exactly what I wanted to do, and and living this life that on the outside looked like enviable. Everybody wanted this kind of life, but I was so embarrassed because inside I was empty, I was unfulfilled, and I was so frustrated with this, and I was embarrassed by it. And so I didn't want anybody else to know, but I found those emotions starting to eke out. you know, I would I would lash out at coworkers. I was always, my kids were always on eggshells, around my house, and my wife would distance herself because I was so volatile with my frustrations. This emptiness inside, that just the harder I worked, the more I tried to do the things that I thought would make me happy. If you work hard, you make lots of money, and then you'll be successful, and then you'll be happy.
Yeah.
Totally the wrong formula, but that's what I was doing. And since it wasn't fulfilling, I started working harder, and it was more and more and more frustrated with what I was trying to produce, and it wasn't offering that satisfaction. So anyway, my life really started to fall apart. Even though it looked like everything was going good on the outside, inside I was empty and unfulfilled. And I remember I blew up at a coworker. We were on a location scout in another state, and I yelled at him. And then we spent the next 5 hours in the same car, just he and I, alone, not saying a word to one another.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
like grown men, you know,
Yeah.
but I was so frustrated and just, you know, I couldn't figure out how to satisfy within, how to feel calm, how to feel peaceful. And anyway, my life started to totally unravel when I discovered that gratitude was actually a skill. And what changed my life were these 10 words. I was doing a bunch of studying and I was reading some research in positive psychology. And this one researcher said something amazing. They said, you can't be grateful and unhappy at the same time. Wow. When I heard that, it's like, holy cow, that means there's something I could do about it. And I was reading about all these studies that they would do where they would put people into different experiments, whether it was writing a letter to somebody who had meant so much to them, whether it was writing in a gratitude journal every day or every week, or, you know, all of these different just exercises. And as they had people do that, and if they could elevate their gratitude level, then suddenly they had control of their lives and they felt this happiness. And when I started to practice what they talked about, oh my gosh, my life changed. You know, where I was self-sabotaging my relationships, where I was wrecking everything that was so important to me, all of a sudden, you know, now I felt peaceful, I felt calm, I felt happiness, and I felt like I could spark my happiness whenever I wanted. I was suddenly in control. It was no longer this strange thing outside of me that was somehow preventing me from being happy, but I was able to have that internally. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I've had a similar experience and this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, because I know that if we really want to be fulfilled, if we really want to be happy, it has a lot to do with this life skill, with gratitude, with the fact that unless we appreciate what we have, unless we appreciate the things that are in our life, we can have everything, literally everything, and not be fulfilled. And I think that this is why it's so important to cultivate this attitude of gratitude, this habit of being grateful. And the beautiful part is that, in my experience, I, I still have, like we talked in the beginning, I still have so-called negative feelings and challenges, and things still happen. But the fact that I have this habit is so much, it makes things so much easier for me. And getting back to gratitude and to happiness is so much easier and so much faster. And I think this is the priceless gift that we all have been given with gratitude.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing we have the power within? You know, we just didn't know about it. And it sounds like you've struggled with the same stuff I struggle with all the time. For me, my biggest struggle, and it's not something that I have mastered, is discouragement. You know, I feel like I'm always running away from it and it's always nipping at my heels trying to get me. And so I need to work super hard and like you said, make gratitude a habit. Use those skills that we have to elevate our gratitude levels so that we can be in charge of that. But yeah, if it wasn't for learning that it was a skill and learning that there are different things, activities that we could do all the time to you know, bring our gratitude levels up to where it's making that difference in our lives, boy, I don't know where I'd be. You know, I kind of shudder to think about that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that material possessions and I don't know, traveling the world is so much more. It's easier to see for other people, and it's easier for people to see that, okay, that's the perfect life one way or another. But the thing with gratitude that's fascinating for me is that it's a lot of it is on the inside, and it's not as visible. And this is one of the things that I'm doing with the podcast, and making it more visible somehow, and making it more um, easily accessible, let's say, than the things that we see on the outside. And I think this is quite important. But what I wanted to to find out from you is when you had your first experience with gratitude, actually living it, actually experiencing it, not just the concept, but actually a personal experience.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story. So, um, I told you a little bit about how frustrated I was and how my life was kind of falling apart. It was really falling apart. I mean, so much so that, like, I was so emotionally unstable. I lashed out with some people. I got put on probation at work,
Oh,
because I was so volatile, and I remember just, I mean, everything was falling apart in my life. And I really worried about what this was going to do with my relationship with my wife. She is the most important thing to me and my family. And I could see how it was affecting them. So when I learned about um, when I learned that the science of happiness, I started studying all of these things, and these researchers that were talking about gratitude, and I and I thought, okay, well, I'm really busy right now, because everyone says to keep a gratitude journal, and I'm like, that's not going to work. It's too
exactly.
simple,
Yeah.
it's too easy. And I said, okay, well, I'm just gonna be more grateful throughout the day, and I'm gonna be more grateful in my prayers at night and whatever. And I just kind of convinced myself that I would naturally do that. Well, 2 or 3 weeks went by and nothing changed, and I realized I hadn't actually been doing it. And so I kind of, shook my head and said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do exactly what they say. Each day, I'm going to write down 3 fortunate things that happened to me. And I'm going to make this commitment. I've got, I went out and I bought this, this kind of cheap little notebook kind of thing. And I put it by my bedside and I said, I am not going to go to bed until I write 3 fortunate things. Well, that was fine for the first week, and the first week went by and nothing really changed. But I remembered this one night, it was probably a week into it. I was so tired and I was so frustrated and angry. And, I'm dragging myself up to bed, just, so tired from the day. And I saw my journal and I realized I hadn't written in my journal yet. And I wanted to go to bed immediately. And I couldn't think of 3 fortunate things. I couldn't think of one fortunate thing. And I just sat there and I was just fuming, because I was so volatile. And anyway, I don't know if I even came up with 3 that night, but I made a commitment to myself that the next day I wasn't going to wait until the nighttime to write or to find those 3 fortunate things. And so the next day I was driving to work. It's in the morning, and I live up in this valley, and I'd have to drive down this canyon, kind of narrow canyon road that only has only has like, one lane each way. And so if you get behind a slow person, you're behind a slow person for a really long time. And of course, I was a frustrated guy and I hated that. And I remember driving down and I get up on this slow guy, just he's going really slow. And just as I get up to him and just as I start to lose my temper, he pulls over to the side and he lets me go by. And then in my rearview mirror, I see him pull back on the road. And so he did that deliberately for me. And so if you
Wow.
remember that definition, gratitude is recognizing you are the recipient of deliberate kindness. I recognized that. And I said, hey, that was something. I can write that down tonight. And as I thought that, all of a sudden I started to feel these feelings I had not felt in years. All of a sudden, I felt connected to this stranger in some car, that he was kind enough to help me out so that I didn't have to ruin my day. And anyway, I just felt these amazing emotions of happiness. And at the same time, I realized, oh my gosh, I bet that stuff happens all the time. And I just haven't been aware. I just haven't been awake. I've been going through my life with blinders, focused on all these things that are outside of my reach. Like that quote from Oprah Winfrey when she talks about, it's the things that you don't have. If you're focused on those, that's going to ruin your happiness. That's going to ruin your gratitude. But when you're grateful for what you have, then that makes everything possible. And and it connects you to others. So anyway, that was my first experience. And once that started happening, I started to become more aware of the deliberate kindness that other people would do. And it made me want to participate as well. It wanted me to be kind and to be generous. And that's when I started to become calm and to no longer be volatile with my temper and my anger and frustration. And it's when I really started to feel that peace. And so gratitude is the magic answer. It's so simple. And, doing habits where we can deliberately, spark those feelings of gratitude just makes a huge difference.
Exactly. And I'm sure that you I went through research and also found this part, but I wanted to mention this to our listeners. The fact that our brain is wired in a way that we will survive, that we focus on the problems, on the struggles, on what's not going right, so that we will survive, so that we will be here tomorrow. And that worked great a few million years ago, but it's not wired for us to be happy, but only to survive. So it's up to us to do something about it, to do gratitude work, to refocus our attention, because if we are focused all the time on, I don't know, the driver that's driving slow in front of us, and we feel somehow that our survival depends on us getting to some particular point in time, we will get mad, and certain circuits in our brain will fire up. But if we see things from a different perspective, from a gratitude perspective, we actually get our power back and our happiness back, from my point of view.
Absolutely. You nailed it right there, Benta.
Awesome.
And
Thank you.
it's so interesting how we condition our mind. How we let our mind be conditioned by society and other circumstances. And so often we are not deliberate about what we want to think about, what we want to focus on. So I'm a commercial filmmaker by trade. I have different roles, whether I'm a writer, producer, director, whatever, on a shoot or a program. When I am in the producer role, it's a terrible role, because what a producer is they're kind of like a lawyer. You know how like lawyers are always looking for loopholes. They're always trying to find what's gonna go wrong, and then word it so that they're all protected. Well, with a producer, you're always worried about what's going to go wrong on a shoot. Who's not going to show up, what location's going to get blown, what bad weather's going to happen, what camera's going to go down. You're always focused.
Oh my God.
And you condition your mind to just be focused and looking for these things. And so, I've been conditioned to think negatively all my life. And now that I learn, oh my goodness, with gratitude, you can deliberately condition your mind. You can focus on the things that are going to be beneficial, the things that are going to be helpful, and get those thoughts and get those patterns in your life. Do you know who Sean Acor is?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Sean wrote a marvelous book called The Happiness Advantage. And in that book, he talked about an experiment that they did at Harvard, and they called it the Tetris effect. And what they did was they had these college students play the game of Tetris for really long periods of time. And if you remember what Tetris was, it's that shape matching up thing where you have these blocks that would come down, and they would have them do this over and over and over and over again. And then when the kids would leave, they would find that they would dream about it. That as they're walking, through the city, they're like, shaping up the skyscrapers. Or when they go through the grocery store, they're organizing in their mind the boxes of cereal. Well, the cool thing about it is if we condition our mind over and over and over again to look for things that we want, to look for fortunate things, to look for, connections of gratitude, then suddenly we can train our mind to look for and expect these good things to happen, and we see it. It's there all the time. We're just not conditioned.
Totally. And I know this from my own experience that, something awesome happens, you enjoy it a bit, maybe, I don't know, a minute or so,
Uh-huh.
but then you have to do something else because that's usually very important and you have to focus on responsibilities and things like that. And you focus so much on the next thing that you need to do that you actually forget about the beautiful thing that happened. And these kinds of things happen, in my opinion, every day, beautiful things, you know. And I think on the one side you mentioned that you were doing the gratitude journaling at night. I think it was great from one point of view, at least the fact that um, you thought about the things that were great that happened that day. I think this is very powerful because when we're tired, when we think about our day, we usually worry about what happened or what's going to happen the next day. But when we think about the beautiful things that did happen that day, we by acknowledging them, it makes our perception of the day and of our life actually um, much more realistic, in my opinion, and also much more positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about that that something good will happen and then we move on and we forget about it. So I wrote a book. It's called The 7 Core Skills of Everyday Happiness. And one of the things that, anyway, skill number one, of course, is gratitude. That's the king of all. Skill number 2 is to savor the now. And I found, and so many other people do this, is we move on, so quickly. And with, like the word savor means to just really relish and make it last as long as possible. If you think about eating a little chocolate or something and you want to savor it and just make that stretch out. Well, that's again an exercise you can do in becoming really present, becoming, right where, being fully present. And when something good happens to you, you savor those good feelings. And maybe you do an exercise like, take 3 breaths, still feeling the good feelings that you just felt when something good happened to you. But anyway, there are different skills that we can do so that we can be in control, be, deliberate about what's going on in our lives and the way that we feel emotions and the emotions that, are going to be helpful and healthy for us moving forward.
Totally. And this relates a lot. I don't know if it's from the book or if you found it from another place. Um, in Hardwiring Happiness, there's actually the author mentions that we can rewire our brain by doing this exact same thing, by the fact that we focus and we get the positive experiences in and we give them more attention in time. It actually rewires our brain, and the neurological links that we have in our brain actually modify in a way that's actually good for us from a happiness standpoint.
Isn't that amazing? Like all these scientists are so smart, they can figure out all this stuff, and and it's so simple yet for us to develop a practice, a habit, like you said, of increasing our gratitude, and we get the benefits. But I love that science is studying this right now, and
Me too.
yeah, and that everything's there to help us,
Yeah, I love
that
it.
we have that control.
By the way, you mentioned practices. Do you have certain practices that you do constantly that get you to be so grateful?
I do, and one of the things that I do also is I change it up. So, because I find that I do something for a while and then I kind of plateau, and it doesn't give the spark to me like it used to. It's kind of like jumping into a hot bathtub. And it feels great at first, and then you get used to it, because you're just sitting there. So what I like to do is I like to change things around. So I have different prompts. Sometimes I will, uh, like my favorite one is to list 3 fortunate things that happened to me that day. It keeps me present on what that day is and what's going on. But then I also like to do exercises. I love journaling. I love to do exercises where I think about who has blessed my life, or what prayers I've had answered, or other things that bring connections. But as I think about those, and as I recognize that I'm the recipient of that deliberate kindness, in whatever exercise or whatever focus that it is. But it's really choosing to be deliberate about what I focus on. But yeah, there's so many different options that you can do to keep it fresh and keep it exciting and keep gratitude as a tool, a nice sharp tool that will help you elevate.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I also wanted to find out from you if you could go back in time, like 10 years ago, or in a place in your life when you didn't feel this grateful. What would you tell your younger self about gratitude?
Uh, I'd want to shake my head. Just listen. It's so simple. I know it. I know it seems crazy. I know that it seems too easy and that the harder things seem more sensible. But just trust me that if you can just develop a pattern, a habit of expressing gratitude and really feeling that inside, doing what you can to feel those emotions, that connection with others, that will change your life, Scott. If I could go back and just I wouldn't want to do my life over again because I like what I've learned and I'm very grateful for the hard lessons. But at the same time, I think, oh my goodness, what if? What if I had that one thing? I wouldn't have to change other things. I wouldn't have to change my job. I wouldn't have to change who I am. I would just have to change my focus and it would change my life. I mean, everything would be different had I done that 10 years ago. And really, when I discovered this, it was about 10 years of darkness that I was in, where I was so frustrated. I'll tell you one real quick story. They sent me on a filming trip to Cambodia. It was a humanitarian project, and I was there to film the poor, impoverished, sad people of Cambodia in order to help this rich North American audience open up their hearts and their wallets to help these people. And, they were doing like clean water and wheelchairs and some vision care and some other things. And anyway, I landed in Phnom Penh and I'm in this little rickety minivan with the film crew, and we're just packed in there, between boxes of camera gear and each other. And the way the camera worked is you couldn't take it from an air-conditioned place and take it out in this really humid environment. And so we had to have the windows down. And so like instantly I'm sweating and I'm complaining and I'm miserable, and I'm thinking about what I'm there for. Oh yeah, I'm here to film the poor, impoverished, sad people. Okay. And I look out the window and I see poor, impoverished people, but I don't see sad people. I remember seeing like this family of 5 packed onto this little motorcycle riding alongside of me. And as I'm, watching them and I'm just amazed at this, I look over and they kind of, look over at me and can tell that I'm staring at them. And their faces just light up with this pure joy.
Wow.
And so, I don't know what to do. So I look back and I smile my fake, North American smile, pretending that life is really as good for me on the inside as it appears on the outside. But I realized they had something that I didn't have. They had this pure joy, this pure happiness, and I wanted it. And so when I was there on that humanitarian trip, I realized I was missing something. And I started to search for it. And I was frustrated because the harder I worked, the more I stretched trying to work harder and do all these different things that I thought would make me happy. Boy, if I had just known that it was to be grateful for what I have. The secret was gratitude. Boy, my life would have changed right there. And so many other things would have changed. My relationships would have, blossomed. And so not looking back with regret, but boy, if you're listening right now and if you're wondering, is this really going to work? Try it. Try it. Give yourself time, invest in yourself, that you will spend time each day deliberately focusing on how you are the recipient of deliberate kindness. It'll change your life.
Exactly. I love it. And I love the story. And I think it's so important. Your message is actually for our listeners that are not practicing gratitude yet or have not tried it yet. And and also for the younger people that might think about gratitude, or they might be listening, and it's not the number one priority for them, because all kinds of worldly things capture their eyes, like it was our case as well. But I'm really curious if you have some people in your life that you're really grateful for that you would like to mention.
Oh, I don't know where I'd be able to stop on this. But my family is the most important thing to me. Oh, I love my wife, and I think about how grateful I am for her every single day, and I can't believe she stuck with me through all those years when I was such an ogre. I mean, I was so frustrated, and I am so grateful that she stuck with me through those years, and that now hopefully she's got a better man. You know, and
That's
my
so
kids,
beautifully said.
and my extended family. Anyway, I have so many connections, and one of the things that I am so grateful for too. So when I learned about this, and I realized that the whole time that I was frustrated and angry, I was self-sabotaging my own happiness. I realized that there are more people that are in that stage, that they're caught in this web and they can't seem to get out, and they're frustrated and they're angry and they're tired and they're exhausted and they're overwhelmed. And I thought, I have something that can help them. And so that's why I wrote the book and created the app and did other things like that, why we do podcasts like this. But one of the amazing things is I get to meet people like you, Benta, people who are living their purpose and are like, what can I do to help others? And this is a new space for me. Rather than being in the selfish world of filmmaking and whatever, I am with heart-centered people who are like, what can I do? How can I help? How can I serve? I've discovered something and I'm happy to share. It's so cool to hang out with people like you. And I'm super grateful for that. And I thank you for contacting me and allowing me to be on your show.
Definitely. It's my pleasure, and I'm really glad that we've met and that we've had this talk. By the way, where can our audience find you? Where can our audience see your work?
Yeah, an easy place is to go to scottwilhite.com. And check me out. I've got some tools and some resources. Again, I believe that happiness is a skill, and like any skill, like playing the violin or dribbling a basketball between your legs, if you use repetition and consistency, you can do that. So I've got some tools out there, an app, a book, and other things that can help you with that. But just know that happiness and fulfillment in life is so possible. And it's simply a matter of putting in some things into practice to where you look within and you're super conscious about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's the perfect ending to our time together. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Benta. I appreciate that.